of 5 Iranian oil tankers docks in Venezuela. Polls open in crucial Surinamese elections as convicted murderer seeks third term. And Trinidad becomes 8th virus-free Caribbean island.
Nearly 10,000 hospitalized cases has fallen below 2,000.
Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. The second of 5 Iranian tankers carrying fuel to the Bolivarian Republic has officially entered Venezuelan waters. The tanker called Forest was met by Venezuelan naval patrol boats north of Margarita and is headed towards the port of El Palito, where one of the country's refineries is located. The third ship, Petunia, is expected to arrive on May 26th. The entire fleet is carrying about 1.5 million barrels of gasoline. The U.S., which has imposed sanctions on both Venezuela and Iran, says it is monitoring the convoy, while Caracas and Tehran have warned Washington not to interfere with the delivery. Meanwhile, the first oil tanker Fortune has already docked in the port of Puerto Cabello in northern Carabobo state and started to unload fuel and other oil products to the El Palito refinery. As we've mentioned before, the Iranian tankers started to arrive in the country in what became a significant show of solidarity between the two nations besieged by U.S. economic sanctions. All the operations by Venezuela's Strategic Operational Command in international waters went by successfully and in peace. We have more in this report.
The sunset highlighted the most anticipated moment. This marked a breaking point in geopolitics. Venezuelan ships entered international waters to meet the first of 5 oil tankers hailing from Iran that set sail 3 weeks ago, carrying fuel for the Venezuelan people. But beyond breaking the U.S. blockade, this image of the Fortune ship and the ocean patrol ship Yeguana writes a new page in the history of defending international law. This is how the mission to escort the tankers began.
Alert, Fortune tanker. This is Ocean Patrol, ship Yeguana of Venezuelan Navy. We are 60 nautical miles outside our territorial waters. We are here to accompany you to port in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
The Patriots manning this ship left behind Venezuela on Friday, May 22nd, headed to meet the Iranian ships. As such, this operation for dignity began. Day 2 of the mission. The young crew prepare for a long day. Their mission just starting.
We are on our way to meet the Iranian tanker and escort them to Margarita Island.
We are in the right position to meet the tanker.
Expectations rose as time went by. 5 hours later, the first Iranian ship appeared.
We have visual contact with the Fortune tanker. We are informing the Navy commanders that we have spotted the ship.
Peace won. Now, the ships made their way to Venezuela.
We are showing the world that we are not alone. U.S. Venezuelans are making allies around the world and are showing that a U.S. blockade can be broken.
This is a peace mission. This is not meant to threaten anyone. We are exercising our rights as a free and sovereign country. We have a right to carry out commercial and financial activities with our fellow nations, to cooperate without threatening anyone.
International waters were left behind. Multilateralism won the day. At around 8 p.m., after 26 hours at sea, they entered Venezuelan jurisdiction.
In the name of our President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and all the Venezuelan people, we thank you for the support of the Republic of Iran that has been traveling with its 3 tankers transporting fuel for the Venezuelan people who are affected by the economic blockade imposed by the United States government.
The captain of the first Iranian oil tanker to enter Venezuela thanked the support and show of friendship by the government.
And the government?
This escort mission is still awaiting the rest of the oil tankers arriving to Venezuela, which are all expected to be here over the next 10 days.
Shifting gears now, Surinamese are heading to the polls to determine whether President Desi Bouterse, who has been found guilty of murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison, will continue to lead the country. Authorities lifted a partial coronavirus lockdown this Monday to facilitate general elections. Voters lined up 6 feet apart as polls opened at 7 a.m. Just over 380,000 people are eligible to elect the 51 members of the National Assembly. The Assembly will then elect the president. Bouterse, who was behind at least 2 coups in the Dutch-speaking nation, is seeking a 3rd term in office. In Caribbean news, Trinidad and Tobago is now the 8th country in the region to be declared virus-free, with 0 active cases of the novel coronavirus. On Friday, the Ministry of Health disclosed that the last active COVID-19 patient has been discharged from the hospital. This brings the total number of recoveries to 108. Meanwhile, 8 people succumbed to the viral illness. The other Caribbean nations to have 0 active cases includes St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Belize, Anguilla, Montserrat, and St. Barthélemy. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley has advised public servants that salaries will be paid in full should the government introduce forced savings to rebound from the effects of COVID-19. She was speaking at her political party's Thanksgiving service to commemorate its 2nd anniversary.
Public servant and every person who is paid by government will receive their full salary package. The majority of it by far will be in cash, but we are asking some to look at bonds that will carry interest rates of 5%. Why? Because at the end of the day, the government is going to have to be the one driving the capital works program in Barbados, dealing with water, dealing with roads, dealing with cleaning the country, dealing with building gabions, dealing with building schools that are the subject of environmental problems every week, or other facilities that government has that literally are in bad need of repair.
A multidisciplinary Cuban team is designing emergency ventilators and producing personal protective equipment to support the country in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and overcome the limitations imposed by the U.S. blockade. From Havana, our correspondent Nayara Tardo has the details.
The Cuban Neuroscience Center is using its knowledge, personnel and logistics to support the country in the fight against COVID-19.
What we did was redirect the technology we have to contribute to the fight against COVID-19. And our activity was basically concentrated in 3 areas. The first is the development of an emergency ventilator to have a reserve in case equipment was needed to provide respiratory assistance in intensive care units because there were not enough machines, which luckily has not occurred.
Cuban authorities have informed that the island has not been able to obtain ventilators from several of its usual suppliers, since 2 manufacturers of this medical equipment were acquired by an U.S. firm. Now, ventilators are being designed and produced in Cuba as an alternative to these limitations.
Among the applications we included in the ventilator was a cell phone application so the doctor can monitor all the functions and alarms of the ventilator from anywhere with no need for an internet connection. Thus, the doctor can intervene remotely in case of any kind of emergency or incident that may arise.
More than 18 types of parts are also made here to fix any breakages of these ventilators. These are necessary resources for the optimal operation of these devices and are currently limited, since countries across the world require them and their governments are limiting their exportation.
Currently, if you're lucky enough to get someone to sell it to you, the patient circuit kit has a cost of approximately $300. Here, we are guaranteeing technological independence in the first place and also our sovereignty. We're making them in the country with the resources we have at hand, and the cost does not exceed $150. It is our contribution from our workplace to combat this pandemic. Given that the country really needs it, we set ourselves the task to develop and design the connectors for the patient circuit, and at the same time to make them in our 3D printing machines.
More than 12,000 face shields distributed by health institutions throughout the country have also been made here, a joint effort alongside other scientific centers, national industry, and self-employed workers. Some provide raw materials, and others provide advice and work organization. Among the new projects is the development of devices to help in the molecular diagnosis of the virus, and the design of a new non-invasive ventilation in collaboration with the University of London.
Nayara Tardó, Telesur, La Habana.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, it's the 57th anniversary of Africa Day, and leaders are making a resounding call for African unity. Stay where you are, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. The United States has imposed a travel ban on foreigners coming from Brazil to stem the spread of the novel coronavirus. Taking effect from Sunday, the measure denies entry to all foreigners who have been in Brazil in the 14-day period prior to when they seek or sought admittance to the U.S. The White House said the ban aims to prevent that sources of additional infections enter the country. With more than 360,000 confirmed cases, Brazil now has the second biggest caseload in the world after the United States. The Trump administration has also banned flights from China, the United Kingdom, and other countries in Europe. In Ecuador, the indigenous Guarani community has condemned the government's failure to protect them from the negative effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The community says the government has not provided resources or proper health care, as 73 of their people have been infected and 5 have died, including several traditional community leaders. Ecuador has over 37,000 cases of COVID-19 and more than 3,000 deaths. And apart from that, hundreds of indigenous communities have been affected by recent floods and an oil spill that has contaminated their rivers.
We are facing a health crisis at the moment in the entire Guarani community, which has only just begun to discover that some of our people are COVID positive.
We want to be under our own control, because waiting for the Ministry of the Environment and the government does not guarantee the survival of our people. Rather, it puts our lives at risk.
Now, members of Colombia's Embera indigenous community have been forcibly displaced from their homes in the department of Choco due to the armed conflict. This community in Alto Baudo were forced out of their homes since Wednesday when armed groups in the region started fighting. It is not yet known which armed groups are inciting this violence. The families had to flee their villages by rowboat. In Bolivia, the de facto government of Janine Áñez has endorsed the threats issued against Parliament by the military, including the threat to arrest legislators if they do not ratify promotions for senior military officials. The Minister of Government, Arturo Murillo, supported the actions by the senior military officials. Senators of the Movement Towards Socialism Party say that constitutionally, the military nominations must be debated in the National Assembly, and denounced that such nominations seek to give immunity to the armed forces for the massacres in Sacaba, Ovejuno, and Sincata on November 15, 2019.
The Legislative Assembly is committing a very serious crime. They are trying to damage the military, and they are angry. That's why they sent a letter. But what the Assembly needs to know is that they may face trial for breach of duties, which can lead to time in prison. Be careful. And the lawmakers and senators don't have diplomatic immunity. So be careful. If tomorrow they go to jail, they'll say it's political persecution.
In Africa, life in Tanzania started to return to normal on Sunday as many businesses were allowed to reopen following the mandatory quarantine.
I am really happy with the decision which has been taken by our government of reopening our business. We were going through a very difficult time financially. Some of our friends in the management lost their job, but after we reopened today, they were employed again. So I really thank the government for the support it has been giving us.
African Union leaders have defended China over its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The African Union Commission officials condemned the stigmatization of China, especially by the United States, over its handling of the coronavirus crisis. They have called on countries to dispel all kinds of defamation and act together in a transparent manner to overcome the pandemic. The United States has been on the forefront on blaming China for the spread of the virus, an allegation which Beijing has strongly denied.
It's unfortunate. There are all kinds of powers who like to denigrate China, who like to put China in a hole, who are even probably jealous of China's rise. So that is to be expected. However, it is for us to act together timelessly in a transparent manner. And it is transparency that dispels all kinds of defamation. Truth, transparency, openness, governance are the undergirds of stability and progress and friendship.
Meanwhile, countries on the African continent are celebrating Africa Day under this year's theme, Silencing the Guns in the Context of the COVID-19. Leaders have spoken on the need for the continent to stop wars and work together to fight the viral respiratory illness. The day, celebrated annually on May 25th, commemorates Africa's freedom and liberation from colonial rule. It also marks the founding of the regional integration body, the Organization of the African Unity, or OAU, formed on May 25th, 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, hosted by the late Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie.
African Union now. There is no time to waste. We must unite or we perish.
And Julius Malema, the leader of South Africa's main opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, has reiterated calls for African unity. He said the continent should adopt one currency and open all borders to neighboring countries.
We want a united state of Africa with one currency, with one economy, with one parliament, with one president, with one judiciary, where all member states will be held accountable. We want Africa to be one.
We have more stories coming up, including a look at how some countries are celebrating al-Fitr. Stay with us. Welcome back. The trial of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on corruption charges has opened or began in Jerusalem. Netanyahu has been accused of receiving gifts from powerful businessmen in exchange for favors, offering to help an Israeli newspaper and a telecom giant in exchange for positive coverage. The Prime Minister has been strongly denying all charges. The trial is expected to last a year or more. If convicted, he could face years in prison. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has announced that the government is ending its 2-month coronavirus lockdown in the occupied West Bank. Mosques, churches and public parks will also reopen, though with social distancing measures, public transport will resume. Cafes and restaurants would be reopened, but subject to restrictions to be announced in the coming days.
All ministries and official bodies return to work regularly starting from Wednesday morning, while maintaining full safety measures in each of the ministries. Shops, commercial and industrial facilities and various institutions are allowed to operate normally starting from Tuesday morning, while maintaining safety procedures.
Speaking of easing restrictions, Japan has lifted a coronavirus state of emergency in Tokyo and 4 other remaining areas, ending the measures nationwide. The decision took effect this Monday after lockdowns were removed in most of the country earlier this month.
Recently, new infections have fallen below 50 for the entire nation, and what was once nearly 10,000 hospitalized cases has fallen below 2,000. Our listing criteria, which has been set at an extremely strict level compared to the world, has been met nationwide. With a method done only in Japan, we have been able to stem the spread of the infection in just a month and a half. I believe we have shown the strength of the Japanese model.
China's National People's Congress continues with its annual session, which was postponed for over 2 months this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. China's top legislature commenced its annual session on Friday to discuss various proposals for laws, ranging from creating a database of sex offenders to strengthening laws against animal cruelty. Lawmakers are also discussing a proposed bill to scrap punishments for having 3 or more children as birth rates continue to decline across the country. The Congress is also expected to review a proposal to strengthen legal enforcement mechanisms in Hong Kong. New Zealand will loosen its coronavirus restrictions from Friday, increasing the maximum size of gatherings from 10 people to 100. This includes gatherings for church services, weddings, and funerals.
The increase in gathering size means we now have some of the most permissive settings of any of the countries we compare ourselves to, including Australia. Going hard and early has paid off for the economy, and now we need to just continue the level of vigilance that has got us here. We are still in a global pandemic. Cases continue to grow overseas, and we do still have people coming home. But for the most part, many aspects of life can and should feel much more normal.
As millions of Muslims around the world celebrate Eid al-Fitr, the diaspora in India marked the event in a subdued manner due to the novel coronavirus. Eid al-Fitr commemorates the end of the holy fasting month of Ramadan. However, amid a global pandemic, most shops were closed and people avoided hugging and greeting each other. This as government leaders and imams appealed for lockdown norms and social distancing to be maintained. There was also a heavy presence of law enforcement officers patrolling the streets.
It's been 1,400 years since the Islam religion was founded. It's the first Eid even our elders could never imagine that we will have to celebrate Eid in such a way. This time, instead of shopping, we help the poor who have been destroyed and those who are not able to celebrate Eid. That money we have given to them so that they too can celebrate Eid with us.
Scenes were different in Bangladesh as thousands joined prayers in phases at Dhaka's main Baitul Mukarram Mosque. Authorities allowed masked worshippers to enter in groups and prayers were held every hour. The Muslim majority nation of 160 million banned big congregations but has allowed people to join prayers in mosques by maintaining safe distance.
May God free us from the wrath He has conferred upon us. May God free all the people of the earth from this wrath. May He free us from it the soonest. May God bestow His virtue upon us to be on the path of the light, and that we stay on the path of the light.
Meanwhile, Iranians celebrated Eid al-Fitr on Sunday, while only some designated mosques were permitted to host communal prayers amid the coronavirus pandemic. Every year, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei would lead Eid prayers with thousands in attendance. However, COVID-19 saw the event cancelled. Still, a mosque in the west of Tehran arranged for worshippers to attend the congregational prayers, with attendees donning face masks and gloves. More than 133,000 have been infected with COVID-19, while 7,300 have died in the country. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thanks for watching.